Ibrahim Traore finds his old teacher sleeping under a bridge. What he does next goes viral. The midnight air hung heavy with dust and diesel as Ibrahim Traore walked alone through the darkened streets of Ouagadougou. His military uniform and presidential entourage had been traded for worn jeans and a simple cotton shirt, the kind he'd worn before history had thrust him into power. The capital slept unaware of his presence. Here he was just another shadow moving through the concrete maze of the city. Ibrahim paused at the edge of the canal bridge, his eyes drawn to the constellation of makeshift shelters beneath. The homeless gathered there every night, invisible to those who crossed above. Something about one particular figure caught his attention. An old man sitting with impossible dignity among the forgotten, his back straight despite using a tattered suitcase as a pillow. Even in destitution, the man maintained an air of quiet authority. Ibrahim descended the crumbling concrete slope, approaching cautiously. The old man's face came into focus beneath the sparse streetlight, and Ibrahim's breath caught in his throat. The deep-set eyes, the distinguished silver stubble, the scar above the right eyebrow from a classroom accident long ago. Features that had once loomed large over a chalkboard, guiding a young boy's uncertain hand. "Mr. Ouedraogo?" he whispered, the name emerging unbidden from a place of childhood memory. The old man stirred, blinking up at Ibrahim with clouded eyes that showed no recognition, only the wareness of one who had learned that attention rarely meant kindness. In that moment, Ibrahim felt the weight of his presidential medallion, though it sat locked away in the palace. A sudden crushing burden of all he had achieved while his teacher had descended into this. Comment where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories like this, because what happens next will shock you. "Do I know you, young man?" Mr. Ouedraogo's voice emerged, roughened by age but carrying the same measured cadence that had commanded attention in classrooms decades ago. Ibrahim's mind flooded with memories, a dusty schoolhouse in Sangeri province, where he had sat in the back row, too shy to speak. The son of a subsistence farmer, his uniform patched and unpatched until the original fabric was barely visible, a boy with downcast eyes and empty pockets. "You once told me I had a voice worth hearing, sir," Ibrahim said softly, even when I didn't believe it myself. Mr. Ouedraogo tilted his head, squinting upward. In the half-light, Ibrahim was transported back to the day everything changed. His 12th birthday, when he had arrived at school to find his path blocked by the headmaster. No fees, no education, the headmaster had declared, his ledger open to Ibrahim's perpetually outstanding balance. Ibrahim had stood frozen, shame burning his cheeks as classmates filed past, some with pity, others with the casual cruelty of children. Then Mr. Ouedraogo appeared, placing a firm hand on Ibrahim's shoulder. "Put it on my account," the teacher had said quietly. "This one stays." Later, when Ibrahim had tried to thank him, Mr. Ouedraogo had waved away his gratitude with characteristic directness. "It's not charity, Ibrahim. I'm investing in Burkina Faso's future. One day you'll do something that matters." Now beneath the bridge, Ibrahim knelt down slowly, meeting his teacher at eye level. The old man's clothes were clean but threadbare, his hands bearing the same ink stains Ibrahim remembered from countless marked essays. "What happened to you, sir?" Ibrahim asked, his voice barely containing the tremor of disbelief. Mr. Ouedraogo's laugh was a dry rattle. "The same thing that happens to many who give their lives to teaching in this country. 37 years of service. And the pension checks stopped coming 6 months ago. Something about administrative restructuring." He gestured vaguely toward the government district. "Meanwhile, officials drive new cars while those who taught them to read sleep under bridges." Ibrahim felt something cold settle in his chest. As president, he had inherited a government riddled with corruption. But this was personal. "You shouldn't be here," Ibrahim said, almost to himself. "Neither should any of them." Mr. Ouedraogo nodded toward the other huddled forms nearby. Former nurses, clerks, even a retired judge. "We've become quite the distinguished community of forgotten civil servants. Pride prevented me." Ouedraogo from meeting Ibrahim's eyes as he adjusted his position against the concrete pillar. "I don't need pity," especially not from a former student whose name I can't even recall. Ibrahim stood slowly, his decision crystallizing. He would not reveal himself. Not yet. First, he needed to understand exactly how the system had failed his teacher and who was responsible. Sometimes the greatest lessons come when we least expect them, Ibrahim said, echoing words Mr. Ouedraogo had once written in red ink across his essay on leadership. Will you allow me to help you tonight? A meal, perhaps? And somewhere better to sleep? The teacher looked up, suspicion and hunger warring in his expression. Why would you do this? Ibrahim extended his hand. Because once you saw value in me when no one else did. You taught me that true power lies not in what you take, but in what you give back. As Mr. Ouedraogo hesitantly took his hand, Ibrahim felt the calluses of a life devoted to others. In that touch was everything. The past that had shaped him, and the future he suddenly knew he must build. Dawn broke over Ouagadougou, painting the modest hotel room in shades of amber and gold. Ibrahim watched as Mr. Ouedraogo slept on the clean bed, his weathered face relaxed for the first time since their encounter. The teacher had accepted the room only after Ibrahim insisted it was not charity, but a debt repaid, though he still hadn't revealed exactly which student he was. Ibrahim's phone vibrated. 6 missed calls from his chief of staff. The presidential absence had been noticed. With a quiet sigh, he sent a cryptic message about a personal matter requiring his attention and turned his thoughts to the task at hand. When Mr. Ouedraogo awoke, Ibrahim had arranged breakfast. Fresh bread, fruit and coffee in proper cups, not the chipped enamel ones from the street vendors. I can't accept all this, the teacher protested weakly, even as his hands reached for the coffee. You already have, Ibrahim replied with a smile. Besides, it's nothing compared to what you gave me. Knowledge, confidence, a future. Over the meal, the full story emerged. The pension fund for educators had been restructured under the previous administration. Paperwork disappeared. Checks dwindled, then stopped altogether. When teachers protested, they were met with bureaucratic mazes designed to exhaust their resolve. There were thousands of us at first, Mr. Ouedraogo explained, his fingers tracing patterns on the tablecloth, marching to the ministry, demanding answers. They divided us with false promises. Some received partial payments to quiet them. Others were threatened. Eventually, people stopped fighting. Ibrahim's jaw tightened, and no one from the current government has addressed this. The teacher's laugh was hollow. The new president, that young military man, Traore, he's busy with security concerns, international politics. What are a few old teachers compared to that? Each word landed like a blow. Ibrahim swallowed his defense and asked instead, what if someone were to help you navigate the system, find out what happened to those funds? I tried for months, Mr. Ouedraogo sighed. The ministry officials treat us like beggars. Unless you have connections, he shrugged. Perhaps I have some, Ibrahim said carefully. That afternoon, dressed in inconspicuous business attire, Ibrahim entered the Ministry of Education. His security detail waited blocks away, under strict orders to maintain his cover. In the marbled lobby, a young clerk looked up with the practiced indifference of the bureaucratically overworked. I'm inquiring about teacher pension disbursements, Ibrahim stated. The clerk barely glanced at him. Complaint department is on the 3rd floor. They're closed for lunch until 2. It's not a complaint. I'm researching anomalies in the distribution system. This earned him a slightly more attentive look. Are you from the audit committee? Something like that, Ibrahim replied. After a series of redirections and waiting rooms, Ibrahim found himself before a middle-aged woman whose nameplate identified her as Aisha Sankara, deputy administrator. The pension situation is complicated, she explained, shuffling papers nervously under his scrutiny. Funds were reallocated during the transition between administrations. Records are incomplete. Reallocated where? Ibrahim pressed. That information is classified. Is it classified because it's sensitive, or because it's incriminating? Aisha glanced at the closed door, then lowered her voice. Both. Look, I process the paperwork I'm given, but between us, check the special discretionary account, the one under the minister's personal authorization. That's where the pension money went before it disappeared. Ibrahim nodded slowly. Why are you telling me this? Her eyes flashed with sudden fierceness. Because my father was a teacher too, 30 years of service. Now he lives with me, because his pension vanished. I keep his dignity intact by pretending his presence helps me with my children. But the truth is, he's barely surviving. As Ibrahim turned to leave, a younger staff member followed him into the hallway. Sir, the man called softly. My name is Konate, junior accountant. If you're truly investigating the pension fund, I have documents you should see. Transfers, signatures, proof. Why would you risk your position? Ibrahim asked. Konate looked him straight in the eye. Because this isn't the Burkina Faso I want to serve. Meet me at the Café du Pays at 7. I'll bring what I have. Meanwhile, Mr. Odrago had not remained idle. When Ibrahim returned to check on him, he found the teacher surrounded by a small group of children in the hotel courtyard, improvising a lesson with sticks in the dirt. They're from the neighborhood, Mr. Odrago explained, his eyes brighter than Ibrahim had yet seen them. They spotted me and asked if I was a teacher. Apparently, I still look the part. Ibrahim watched as his old mentor patiently explained basic geometry using nothing but twigs and stones. The children hung on every word, their faces alight with understanding. This was the man who had shaped generations, reduced to teaching in dirt because a system had deemed his contribution worthless. That evening, at the cafe, Konate slid a flash drive across the table. Everything's here. The former minister created a shell committee. They diverted 3 years' worth of pension funds into private accounts. Over 20 million CFA francs. And the current minister? He inherited the system. I don't know if he's actively stealing, but he's certainly not fixing it. He benefits from the confusion, uses the misplaced funds to curry favor with international partners, showing budget surpluses that don't really exist. Ibrahim pocketed the drive. This evidence, could it stand up to scrutiny? It's their own numbers, Konate said. Bank transfers don't lie. 3 days passed, in a blur of quiet investigation. Ibrahim maintained his cover with Mr. Odrago, who was slowly regaining his strength and dignity. The teacher had taken to holding informal classes for street children each morning, his natural authority drawing them like magnets. What Ibrahim discovered through Konate's files confirmed his worst fears. The corruption wasn't just a few greedy officials. It was systematic, designed to bleed the most vulnerable while protecting the powerful. On the 4th day, Ibrahim received word that the Minister of Education would be speaking at a national conference on educational excellence. The irony was not lost on him. I'd like you to attend this with me, Ibrahim told Mr. Idrago, handing him a freshly pressed suit he'd had delivered. The teacher eyed it suspiciously. Why would they let someone like me into such an event? Because you'll be with me, Ibrahim replied. And because you have more to say about education than anyone who'll be on that stage. Mr. Ouedraogo ran his fingers over the fine fabric. Who are you, really? No former student has this kind of access or resources. Ibrahim smiled. You once told me to become someone who could make a difference. Tomorrow, you'll see if I succeeded. As they prepared to leave for the conference, Ibrahim's phone rang. The Minister of Education himself demanded to know why the presidential schedule showed Ibrahim attending his event without prior notification. I have a special interest in your presentation, Ibrahim replied coolly. Particularly the section on how you've managed the education budget. The silence on the other end was deafening. I'll see you shortly, Minister. I'm bringing a guest, a consultant on educational ethics. I believe you'll find his perspective illuminating. And that's when the Minister of Education himself walked in, flanked by aides, his face a mask of controlled panic. Mr. President, I must insist on speaking with you privately before the conference. Mr. Ouedraogo's head snapped up, eyes widening as he looked between Ibrahim and the man who had just addressed him as Mr. President. The grand amphitheater of the National University buzzed with the murmurs of Burkina Faso's educational elite, university deans, policymakers, international donors, and senior administrators in their finest attire. Journalists positioned their cameras at strategic angles, prepared to document yet another government showcase of progress and reform. In the wings, Minister Salif Diallo paced nervously, his usual confidence replaced by a twitchy agitation. The unexpected presidential attendance had thrown his carefully scripted presentation into chaos. Even more concerning was the flash drive Ibrahim had silently placed on the table during their private meeting, a display of evidence that needed no verbal accusation. "We can discuss pension restructuring later," Diallo stammered. "Perhaps after the conference." Ibrahim's response had been simple. "No. Today we talk about accountability." Now, as the minister approached the podium, he scanned the audience and froze. In the front row sat President Ibrahim Traore, not in military uniform or formal attire, but in a simple suit matching the one worn by the elderly man beside him. "Distinguished guests," Diallo began, his voice betraying the slightest tremor. "It is my honor to present our 5-year strategic plan for educational excellence in Burkina Faso." As the minister launched into statistics about improved examination scores and increased enrollment, Ibrahim leaned toward Mr. Ouedraogo. "Do you recognize him?" The teacher squinted. "He was at the ministry when I tried to file my pension complaint. He walked past us as if we were invisible." Ibrahim nodded slowly. "Not invisible today." On stage, Diallo reached the portion of his speech addressing financial management. "Through careful stewardship of our limited resources," he intoned, "we have balanced essential expenditures while reducing administrative overhead." Ibrahim rose silently and walked toward the stage. The audience hushed as he approached, confusion rippling through the rows. This was not protocol. Presidents did not interrupt ministers mid-speech. "Minister Diallo," Ibrahim said, his voice carrying without the need for amplification, "would you please explain what you mean by reduce administrative overhead?" Diallo's smile froze. "Mr. President, because I'm curious if that includes the pension funds for 4,200 retired educators who have not received their legally mandated compensation for the past 6 months." A collective intake of breath swept through the audience. "There have been temporary allocation adjustments," Diallo managed. "Adjustments," Ibrahim repeated. "Is that what we call it when teachers who devoted their lives to building this nation are sleeping under bridges?" He turned to the audience. "I want to introduce someone to you. My teacher, Mr. Ouedraogo, who once paid my school fees when my family could not, who saw potential in a farmer's son, who taught me that leadership is service, not privilege." Ibrahim gestured, and Mr. Ouedraogo slowly made his way to the stage, his dignity intact despite the whispers that followed him. "Mr. Ouedraogo," Ibrahim continued, "taught for 37 years in our most challenging districts. He educated cabinet ministers, doctors, engineers, and yes, even a future president. And how have we repaid him? 6 months ago, his pension disappeared. Last week, I found him sleeping under the canal bridge." Gasps and murmurs cascaded through the hall. Journalists frantically adjusted their cameras. "Mr. President," Diallo interjected, "these are complex administrative matters." "There is nothing complex about theft," Ibrahim cut him off. He produced the flash drive. "Here I have evidence of 20 million CFA francs in teacher pension funds diverted to private accounts. Accounts with signatures I recognize." Mr. Ouedraogo stood silent, his eyes widening as he finally understood the full scope of what was happening. "Ibrahim," he whispered, using the president's first name in a moment of unguarded recognition. "Little Ibrahim from Sangwe." Their eyes met, teacher and student, separated by decades and social position yet connected by something more profound than either. "Yes, sir," Ibrahim said softly, "the same boy who couldn't afford books until you bought them for me." He turned back to the audience, voice strengthening. "This is not about politics. This is about who we are as a nation. When we abandon those who built our foundation, we ensure our own collapse." Ibrahim stepped back to the podium, now fully assuming his presidential authority. "Effective immediately, I am ordering a full audit of the Education Ministry's finances. Minister Diallo is suspended pending investigation. All pension payments will resume within 72 hours, with back pay to follow. The audience erupted, some in applause, others in concerned whispers. Government officials exchanged alarmed glances while teachers in attendance rose to their feet in stunned ovation. Ibrahim raised his hand in silence. But today's most important moment is not a presidential decree. It is this. And then Ibrahim Traore, president of Burkina Faso, did something that would be captured on 1,000 phones and shared across continents. He knelt before his teacher. "Mr. Ouedraogo," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the now silent hall. "I ask your forgiveness, not just as your former student, but as the leader of a government that failed you. You gave me knowledge, and I gave you hardship in return. This ends today." The old teacher's hand trembled as he reached out to touch Ibrahim's shoulder. "Stand up, Mr. President. This isn't appropriate." "No," Ibrahim replied. "This is exactly what is appropriate. A nation that forgets its teachers forgets its future." He stood and faced the audience once more. Every person in this room was shaped by a teacher. Every skill we possess, every idea we champion, began in a classroom with someone who believed in us. Today, we remember that debt. Minister Diallo had retreated to the side of the stage, his aides forming a protective circle as he frantically made calls, but the momentum had shifted irreversibly. In the audience, phones lit up as the story spread across social media. "Remember your teachers" began trending within minutes. This conference was supposed to be about educational excellence, Ibrahim concluded. Let it instead be the day we redefine what excellence means. Not glossy reports or impressive statistics, but simple human dignity for those who gave us the tools to build our nation. As Mr. Ouedraogo stood beside him, shoulders straight and head high for the first time in months, flashbulbs illuminated them in a tableau that would dominate news cycles for days. The president and the teacher, power and wisdom, present and past. A visual metaphor for the country's potential redemption. In the back of the hall, junior accountant Konate watched with quiet satisfaction. Beside him, Ayesha Sankara wiped away tears, thinking of her own father. A movement had begun, not with armies or proclamations, but with a simple act of recognition that now rippled out across the nation, awakening something long dormant. Accountability. The presidential motorcade crawled through streets lined with people 3 deep, many holding hastily made signs. "Thank you, teacher, president, and education is our foundation." In the week since the conference, Burkina Faso had witnessed a transformation that no policy paper could have engineered. A nationwide conversation about value, dignity, and debt beyond currency. Inside the lead vehicle, Ibrahim studied the report from the Emergency Audit Commission. Accounts frozen, assets seized, resignations tendered. Minister Diallo had been placed under house arrest after attempting to flee to Côte d'Ivoire. The dominoes were falling faster than anyone had anticipated. "They're calling it the teacher revolution on social media," said Konate from the facing seat, still adjusting to his new role as head of the Pension Restoration Commission. "Teachers are coming forward with their stories everywhere. It's not just education, nurses, sanitation workers, postal clerks. Every public service sector has been affected." Ibrahim nodded, gazing out at the faces pressed against the tinted windows, trying to glimpse the leader who had knelt before his teacher. "How many have been processed so far?" he asked. "Nearly 800. The first pension checks were distributed yesterday. We're prioritizing the most vulnerable cases first." The car slowed as they approached the canal bridge. Transformed now from a symbol of neglect to a rallying point, the makeshift shelters had been cleared away, replaced by a community action center staffed by volunteers. Social workers conducted interviews at folding tables, university students distributed meals, and medical personnel offered free checkups. "It's remarkable how quickly people mobilized," Ibrahim observed. "People want to help when they see authentic leadership," Konate replied. "Your story humanized the issue." At the presidential palace, Ibrahim found Mr. Ouedraogo waiting in the garden, watching butterflies dance between flowering bushes. The teacher had accepted temporary accommodation in the guest quarters, though not without protest. "I'm creating a scandal," he had argued, A president shouldn't house his teacher like some royal pensioner. You're not creating a scandal, Ibrahim had countered. You're helping me understand the true scope of the problem. Consider it a consulting position. Now the old teacher rose as Ibrahim approached. The past week had already transformed him. Proper meals, rest, and restored dignity had erased years from his bearing. Your city is alive with purpose, Mr. Edrago observed. You've awakened something powerful. They walked together along the garden path, the unequal relationship of president and citizen somehow balanced by their shared history. I received a call from the Senegalese president this morning, Ibrahim said. They're launching an investigation into their own pension system. Mali and Niger have requested our audit protocols. It seems we've started a regional reckoning. Mr. Ouedraogo nodded thoughtfully. Systems fail when those who design them forget they'll one day need them. The minister who diverts a pension fund rarely imagines himself old and vulnerable. They paused beneath a baobab tree, its ancient trunk a testament to survival through countless seasons of drought and plenty. I've been thinking about what comes next, Ibrahim said. This can't be just a momentary correction. We need structural change. And what form will that take? Ibrahim smiled. I was hoping you might advise me. I'm establishing a commission on educational reform, not just salaries and pensions, but curriculum, teacher training, resource allocation. Who better to guide it than the man who taught me to think beyond the obvious? Mr. Ouedraogo raised an eyebrow. You have plenty of qualified experts at your disposal. Experts who have never taught in a classroom with leaking roofs and no textbooks. Experts who haven't inspired children who arrived hungry and left nourished by knowledge. I need someone who understands education as a calling, not a bureaucratic exercise. The teacher was silent for a long moment, his weathered hand resting against the baobab's bark. You know, when I first saw you under that bridge, I didn't recognize the president. I saw only a kind stranger. Now I realize that was the greater truth. You are that kind stranger first, president second. That gives me hope. That evening Ibrahim addressed the nation from his office. Behind him stood not the usual array of ministers and military officers, but a diverse group of civil servants, teachers, nurses, sanitation workers, postal clerks, the invisible backbone of the nation. We have begun a journey toward accountability, he said. But accountability is not merely punishing the corrupt. It is also recognizing our collective responsibility to one another. Every citizen who has ever been taught, healed, protected, or served by our public workforce shares in this responsibility. He announced the formation of the Civil Service Protection Act, legislation that would create independent oversight of all pension systems and establish criminal penalties for misappropriation of these funds. Some will say we cannot afford such comprehensive protection, Ibrahim continued. I say we cannot afford to abandon those who built our nation. The true measure of a society is not how it treats its most powerful, but how it honors its most essential. As he spoke across the city, former Minister Diallo watched from his house arrest, the remnants of his influence evaporating hour by hour. 3 of his deputies had already provided testimony in exchange for leniency. His phones had been confiscated, his accounts frozen. The system he had manipulated had turned against him with stunning efficiency. But the most profound transformation was occurring in the neighborhoods and villages, where citizens were organizing their own support networks. Retired teachers were forming tutoring centers. University students were documenting the histories of their former teachers. Families were bringing elders who had taught into their homes, reversing a tide of neglect that had swept away traditional respect for age and wisdom. In the presidential garden, as Ibrahim concluded his address, Mr. Ouedraogo sat with his former colleagues, men and women who had been located and brought to the palace for what was being called the Teachers' Dialogue. Their conversation drifted from immediate needs to broader visions of what education could become in a society that truly valued it. You weren't just investing in me, sir, Ibrahim told his teacher later that evening. You were showing me how to invest in others. That ripple effect might be your greatest legacy. Mr. Ouedraogo smiled, the weight of recent hardship lifting from his features. Every teacher dreams that their students will surpass them. Few get to see it so dramatically demonstrated. As night fell over Ouagadougou, the news traveled through televisions and radios, through text messages and social media. The first back payments to pensioners would be distributed the following morning. For thousands who had given their lives to public service, tomorrow would bring not just financial relief, but the restoration of something even more precious: recognition of their worth. 3 months later, the morning sun illuminated the newly constructed Ouagadougou Center for Educational Excellence, its modernist architecture blending harmoniously with traditional Burkinabe design elements. The red earth of the courtyard had been transformed into an outdoor learning space, with conversation circles formed by stone benches beneath the shade of young baobab trees. Saplings now, but planted with the confidence that they would shelter generations. Crowds gathered for the inauguration ceremony, their excitement palpable. Children from nearby schools sat cross-legged at the front, their uniforms crisp and identical regardless of family wealth. One of the first reforms implemented under the new educational framework. Behind them stood teachers, both current and retired, distinguished by green sashes that had become a symbol of the movement. Ibrahim arrived without ceremonial announcement, choosing to walk through the crowd rather than be driven to a designated entrance. People reached out to touch his sleeve, to murmur thanks, to show him photos of relatives who had received their long-delayed pensions. The story that had begun beneath a bridge had expanded into a narrative, embraced by an entire nation. On the small raised platform, Mr. Ouagadougou waited, transformed by these months of purpose and restoration. No longer the desperate figure from beneath the bridge, he stood tall in traditional formal attire, surrounded by a team of educators he had assembled to revolutionize teacher training across the country. "You've created something remarkable here," Ibrahim said as he joined his teacher on the platform. "We've created it," Mr. Ouagadougou corrected. Every person who spoke up, who shared their story, who refused to accept that service should end in poverty. They built this moment. The ceremony began not with political speeches but with student performances, poetry, music, and dramatic interpretations of the journey from neglect to recognition. Then came the announcements. All teacher pensions had been fully restored, with back payments. A new educational fund had been established to ensure future stability. International partners had committed to supporting teacher training initiatives throughout the region. When it was Mr. Ouagadougou's turn to speak, he approached the microphone with the same measured cadence he had once used to call classes to order. "I have been a teacher for 40 years, he began. "But these past 3 months have taught me more than all those decades combined. I have learned that a society reveals its soul through its priorities. When we allow those who shaped our minds to sleep under bridges, we betray not just them but ourselves." He gestured to the new center behind him. "This building is not a monument to me, despite its name, which I accepted only under considerable pressure." A ripple of appreciative laughter moved through the crowd. "It is a commitment to a future where knowledge is our most valued resource, and those who transmit it our most honored citizens." Mr. Ouagadougou introduced his team of educational reformers, experienced teachers from rural and urban settings, administrators who had maintained integrity through difficult times, and young innovators bringing fresh approaches to age-old challenges. "Our first initiative begins today," he announced. "The National Teacher Documentation Project will record the stories of educators across Burkina Faso, their methods, their challenges, their moments of breakthrough with students. We will create a living archive of pedagogical wisdom before it is lost." The impact extended beyond borders. On a large screen, video messages played from leaders in neighboring countries who had launched their own investigations into pension mismanagement. What had begun as one president recognizing one teacher had catalyzed a regional examination of how public servants were valued and protected. When Ibrahim rose to speak, a hush fell over the gathering. He had become more than a military leader who had assumed power. He was now the president who knelt, the student who remembered, the leader who acted on principle rather than political calculation. 3 months ago I spoke of accountability, he began. Today I speak of transformation. What started as correcting an injustice has become reimagining our national priorities. When we recognize those who build our foundation, we create the possibility of building higher than we ever thought possible. He turned to Mr. Odrago. My teacher once told me that education is not filling a bucket, but lighting a fire. The fire he lit in me continues to illuminate my path. The fire we have lit together will warm generations to come. After the ceremony, as the crowds dispersed into conversation circles and celebration groups, Ibrahim and Mr. Wadraug walked together toward the canal bridge, now unrecognizable from that fateful night. The underpass had been converted into an open-air classroom, where retired teachers offered free tutoring to any child who sought help. Solar-powered lights ensured the space remained bright and welcoming, into the evening hours when working parents could bring their children. From darkness to light, Mr. Wadrago observed, a fitting metaphor for education itself. They stood together on the bridge, looking down at the transformation below. Children sat with elderly teachers, their animated conversations floating upward, questions being answered, curiosity being kindled, potential being recognized. Do you remember what you told me when I doubted myself in secondary school? Ibrahim asked quietly. You said, the hand that writes today's lesson shapes tomorrow's nation. I didn't fully understand then. Mr. Wadrago nodded slowly. And now you've proven it true in ways I never imagined. A group of children spotted them and waved enthusiastically. Ibrahim and Mr. Wadrago waved back. The president and the teacher momentarily equal in the children's excited recognition. The most valuable lesson you taught me wasn't in any textbook, Ibrahim continued. It was that dignity isn't granted by position or wealth. It's an inherent right that must be fiercely protected. Perhaps that's why you recognized mine, even when I'd almost lost it myself, Mr. Wadrago replied. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the city, they walked along the bridge that had once sheltered desperation and now harbored hope. The symbolism wasn't lost on either man. How something so utilitarian, designed merely to help people cross over obstacles, could become a place of connection and transformation. We're establishing scholarship programs in your name at every regional university, Ibrahim said, for students who show promise but lack resources. Just as I once did. Better to name them for the principle than the person, Mr. Wadrago suggested. Call them bridge scholarships, to honor where this journey began and what education truly does. It bridges divides, spans generations, connects potential to opportunity. Ibrahim smiled at the elegant simplicity of the idea. Bridge scholarships. They will be. In the distance, the lights of Ouagadougou began to twinkle on, one by one, then in clusters, until the city glowed with possibility. What had started with one man finding another beneath a bridge had illuminated an entire nation's path forward, not through grand political theory or economic policy alone, but through recognition of the fundamental connections between all citizens, between past and future, between teacher and student. The bridge that once sheltered a forgotten teacher now connects generations of learners to their future. Ibrahim said softly, putting words to the transformation they both witnessed. Mr. Wadrago placed a hand on his former student's shoulder, not as a subject touching a president, but as a teacher acknowledging the greatest achievement of any educator, a student who had taken their lessons and built something greater than the teacher could have imagined. Below them, a child's laughter rang out, clear and promising in the evening air, the sound of a future taking shape, one lesson at a time. Have you ever had a teacher who changed your life? Comment below your story could inspire others. And don't forget to like and subscribe.